I'm Sandy Reiniger, and I'm so pleased to introduce Westminster member Sue Frost as our speaker this evening. Sue served as the Stephen Minister at Westminster from 2014 to 17. She has 15 years experience in museum management and human resources and 15 years of experience as a professional organizer, working with neurotypical and neurodiverse women whom she helped in setting and achieving goals in their personal and professional lives via organization, personalized systems, understanding their learning styles, and time management. During the pandemic, she received formal training to be a life coach through a subsidiary of the International Coaching Federation's accredited program. Since 2022, Sue has applied that training and the culmination of her experience to serve as a rapid rehousing housing liaison, case manager, and coach. Using a client-centered and trauma-informed care approach, Child Inc. works with individuals and families fleeing domestic violence towards safety, housing, stability, and beginning a new life.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Sue and thank you to Sandy and Roger for helping me through a few technical hiccups last night. So I'm hoping that won't happen again. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you all about Child Inc. I wanted to have an overview and then maybe focus a little bit more on rapid rehousing, which is the department that I serve. Um, Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that you typically have questions at the end. So I'll follow that practice. But if I say anything that's not clear, just shout and I will try my best to answer a question or clarify anything. So now I'm going to try to bring up my slides. Bear with me just a minute. Can you all see what the slides now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Bear with me.
So it looks like you just have to press play and then use the back arrows. There you go.
Sorry about that. I thought it was at the beginning, but okay, so Child Inc. Child Inc. is the leading advocate for Delaware's children, but we also serve adolescents, adults, women, and men. We are serving people in all three counties. Our major focus is prevention, intervention, and treatment services for people who have been exposed to domestic violence. So the organization was founded 60 years ago last year by Martha DuPont and her husband, Henry DuPont. They rescued a struggling group home for boys and decades of determination. And their vision resulted in statewide reforms, dramatic changes in the Delaware child welfare system, and a very comprehensive social service agency. So Mrs. DuPont served on the board until her passing in 2017, and Mr. DuPont passed away in 2002, leaving a legacy of service for generations. Well, we hope will be generations. Today, Child Inc. provides essential services for thousands of Delawareans. So most people have a grasp of what domestic violence is, but maybe not the scope of it. It's intimate partner violence. And it includes a range of abuse: physical, sexual abuse, emotional, and psychological abuse. And all can be as serious as the physical abuse. Anyone can be a victim, anyone can be a perpetrator. Women are, by and large, the largest majority, they're the majority of victims. But men also are domestic violence victims. And domestic violence is really a pattern of behaviors that's used to gain or maintain power and control over another person. Um, so I'm going to show you the power and control wheel of abuse. So it gives us an idea of the different types of abuse, and it's used as a learning tool, not only for people who have experienced the abuse, but also for perpetrators of abuse, because we also provide learning experiences for those people who have perpetrated abuse. So obviously power and control, that's the overall idea. But inside the wheel, those areas make up the subtle, continual behaviors over time. And those can be devastating to self-esteem: coercion, threats, use of intimidation, emotional abuse, using children as pawns, using isolation, denying, blaming, economic abuse. Emotional abuse can be as debilitating as physical abuse. Economic abuse is very, very common and is one of the main things that keeps people stuck in these relationships. So some of the statistics, these are only a few, and I didn't have the numbers available for the end of 2024, but so 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will experience domestic violence. So that means we probably all know someone. 1 in 10 men over the age of 18 years or older has experienced domestic violence. Most people don't seek help. So as of the end of 23, 10,000, roughly 10,500 people reported criminal domestic violence incidents. Far more people experience it than report it. This is really a very small fraction of the people that are experiencing it. 3,500 calls were received by domestic violence hotlines. And people in the state of Delaware, sometimes we'll get calls from people outside the state of Delaware. We'll call Child Inc. At 24/7. We receive calls and triage. So why are people reluctant to leave? And the reasons can be surprising. Of course, there's fear, but it's genuine, true risk. People are afraid for their lives. There's a lot of shame. It's very common to judge people. Most people, I've heard many people say, well, I wouldn't, first time that would be it for me. But they've experienced long intimidation, diminished self-esteem. They have a lack of resources that have been taken away from them over time. There's a large group of people with disabilities are greatly at risk. People have children that they have to take care of. Also, reproductive coercion is a not unusual part of domestic violence. Sometimes even people that want to terminate a pregnancy might be threatened that their abuser will tell everyone and ruin their reputation. Financial abuse appears in 99% of abuse cases. And this makes it particularly hard for people to leave. It can manifest in so many ways, but it can look something like this. Partner will say, I'll take care of the finances, I'll take that burden off of you. The victim can share that their boss is difficult. The partner may say, leave the job, I'll take care of you. Um, it may start with putting the partner on a budget that slowly gets smaller or an allowance. Um, they may have a credit card that they can track their spending and they know where they are. And this can lead to not allowing them to leave the house to go to work. So this doesn't describe every case, but these are not unusual situations. So who are the people that perpetrate this? We've probably all heard the expression that hurt people, meaning, they have been abused or experienced abuse in their life. The behavior was perhaps modeled in their home. They had just experienced it elsewhere, but for whatever reason, they believe that their feelings and needs should be prioritized. And abuse is a manifestation of that. The goal is to make the partner feel diminished, undeserving, not to lack independence, not deserving of respect. This behavior is a choice, even if someone was brought up in it. It's a choice. It's never the right choice. So not only does child serve the people that have been abused and their children, but we have offender intervention services, and that is for the people that have been the abusers, and that's often court ordered, but sometimes it's voluntary. And the idea is, when possible, to enable families to reunite or to stop the spread of domestic violence. So how it starts to work within Child Inc. is the hotlines and shelters. As I mentioned, we have a 24/7 hotline that's answered by trained staff. It's bilingual, to help callers with safety planning and, if necessary, directions to two of our confidential shelters. Sometimes people are just calling for safety planning. They're not ready to leave, or they may have options as far as places to go, but sometimes people have no place else to go, and then the shelter is the next step. And the shelter is for individual women and children, but we have hotel vouchers that are available for those who identify as male. And the shelter case managers will assess client needs, help to formulate their goals, and connect them right away with either counseling, medical needs, legal, social services, and employment. I should say, when those calls come into the hotline, the first thing that we have to assess is if that person is still in danger, to get to safety, to get to healthcare services before we even start to talk about whether they're ready to come into the shelter. If they have a head injury, if they're whispering because the abuser is in another room, then we have to talk about a safety plan first and foremost. So the triage begins right there on the hotline. So the rapid rehousing program, people come to the rapid rehousing program and they're referred by our shelters or domestic service providers. It's funded by HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and we use a housing first model. So that means that we don't require participants to have met their goals for employment or stability in order to qualify for the program. We help them with their goals while they're in the program. And it's proven to be more cost effective than long-term sheltering and more beneficial to people for their health and their overall outcomes when we're dealing with homelessness situations. We do have a waiting list, unfortunately. Luckily, it's not too long, but we have to prepare people for that and what their options are while they're waiting. Once people are in the program, our goal is to house them within 30 days. We offer financial assistance, and that can look different for different people depending on how financially stable they are when they come to us. It can be security first month if they haven't had any time to save for that, or it can extend longer depending on what their needs are. And case management is a big part of that. Hold on, I just see somebody that looks like they need to be admitted. If somebody could let her in.
I did
Intensive
that.
case.
We're good.
Support their needs. Present themselves to of that. We meet with our clients in the home regularly, even after they're housed. I'm just checking if somebody could shout.
Your computer seemed to freeze for a minute, Sue. Maybe you're okay now.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully it'll be all right. Any questions so far? Okay. So of course we have to work with the housing market that we have. And our friend Sonia Starr, the policy director at the Housing Alliance, has kept us informed of what that looks like. We're 20,000 units short here in Delaware, and landlords are business people, and most require 3 times the rent in salary, credit 650 or over, long-term employment is preferred, references. And because financial sabotage is so common, it makes work challenging. So just use an example here. A 2-bedroom apartment at 1,575. If you're a medical secretary, and that title still exists, the Department of Labor quoted an hourly rate at 1968. You'd need to work 60 hours in order to pay for that apartment monthly. Our minimum wage in Delaware is $15 an hour. So it's challenging for people, and we serve as advocates, and we get the job done, but it's not easy, and we have to educate people on how to best present themselves, because it is like interviewing for a job. You want to be their best tenant and somebody that they can rely on in a very tight market. So some of the obstacles. Evictions never leave your record. Some people are evicted because they've had domestic violence and the police have been called, and they don't know that they're protected by VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. So once you have an eviction, you can pay any money owed as a judgment, but it will show that, but the eviction never goes away from your record. And I learned something not too long ago, that when we're housing people, they'll want the names of all the parents and the children on the lease. And I imagine that was just because, well, they don't want Uncle Bobby moving in or Grandma Jane. They want to keep track of, who's supposed to be there. But there are known cases of evictions impacting the records of the minors that could be, parents could be impacted by a variety of reasons and evicted. And those evictions can impact and be on the records of the minors living there. So there's some legislation I hear that's being talked about that they can be expunged after 5 years of good standing. I don't know where that is right now, but I hope to be able to follow that. Lease renewals, there's no obligation to renew after the 12-month obligation as far as the landlord. So, that's part of our orientation and education process, that you don't need to be best friends, but to foster easy communications, we offer ourselves as liaisons to the landlord. If there's any hiccup in communication, we want to be there to smooth it out, because the easier you are as a tenant, the more likely they are to rent to you again. There's also no caps on rent increases at this time. So financial assistance, so we can offer security, first month, last month. It averages 3 to 6 months of assistance, and it's typically in descending order, starting with more and ending with less, because we start with the end in mind, that we are working with those clients and we encourage saving, we encourage preparing for that time that we are no longer working together. And we call it setting people up for success, that they're ready. We've done budgets every month and talked about alternative plans when expenses are a little bit more than expected. We like our clients, for their own sake, to be educated, but we discuss that with our landlords as well, and enjoy good landlord tenant relationship. We like to call them our angel landlords. They know that some, not all of our clients have had hiccups, and often through no fault of their own, and they know the reputation of our company, but they also, they're taking a chance. They can easily rent to whoever they want in this market, and they reinvest in their community. We couldn't do it without them. We work with some pretty great people, and we're always looking for new landlords. So case management's very comprehensive, because everyone we speak with, they have domestic violence in common, but the rest is, well, they're as different as all of us. They have different safety needs and planning, and different goals of what they want to do, and to increase their income through work and education. We can get them started with education through some stipends, but we set them in the right direction. And we even get calls sometimes after people have graduated from the program, for advice if they hit a hiccup, but, are well on their way. And it's good to see that. It's good to hear that people are succeeding and living a different life anew, and they just call in for a little bit of advice. So we have a host of other services. Our community health advocates tend to work with people in the field, so to speak, through advocating for them in health or social services. They may go to the courts with our clients, and they may refer them, somebody they're working with that may be safe, but then become unsafe, and they refer them to rapid rehousing. Our domestic violence advocates, and some are volunteers, assist petitioners through to get protections from abuse in the courts. And that's in all 3 counties. So we do look for volunteers. If anybody has interest in that, we can talk. And we have supervised visitation centers at 2 locations. And they are monitored. Sometimes it's court ordered, sometimes it's just used by clients who have difficult shared child custody, and they can go to these centers. And it's easier for the children. There's orientations on, it's all about the child's experience and how to make that better for them and to grow into being able to do this more independently themselves. And counseling. Counseling is a part of that. For children who have witnessed domestic violence, so that they grow up knowing that this is not the norm and, are treated for their trauma, and also treatment for the adult survivors. We have education classes for parents, so that they, and sometimes it can be generational, that people that have been with the organization for a long time may have seen a mom in the shelter and seen a daughter come to the shelter later. So we want to educate people and let them know how this works, and what to expect and want from and what is a healthy relationship. We have runaway and homeless youth services to prevent our youth from running away and becoming homeless, and in many cases reuniting through just counseling and talking with both the family and the youth. And foster care for children whose families are having trouble and it's not safe for them to stay in the home. That's another area that we're always looking for foster parents. The protections that are available, there are many, but some of them include protections. The VAWA, federal law enacted in 1994, and it was initially penned by then Senator Joe Biden, but there have been many iterations since then. And it basically protects victims of domestic violence, and it can be men or women. It provides funding resources. It has protections so that if somebody lives in federally subsidized housing, and federally subsidized can be rapid rehousing, that they cannot be evicted. And sometimes even if they live with their abuser and the abuser's name is on the list, the lease can be transferred to the partner who is the abuse victim, or they find another location within that subsidized housing for them. It can even extend to battered spouses, enabling them to apply for citizenship, independent of their spouse, if they were seeking citizenship as a spouse or through marriage visas. And there are probably many more aspects of it, but those are the larger protections. I love our testimonials. I love our work. It's not easy, but when we get people housed, it's like Christmas every day. Yesterday, we got paid in hugs and kisses, and typically in the workplace, that's discouraged. But, when the client's coming at you with a hug and they're crying from sheer joy, there's no turning it down, and the woman we were working with yesterday, we were helping her prepare for moving into a place tomorrow. When we said that she heard her utilities, she was going to have to pay a $250 deposit. she started to look concerned, and we said that we could help with that. And then she started to cry more, and then they needed beds, and we said we could help with that. And she started to cry more. And then we were trying not to cry. So it can be, it's just a really fulfilling place to work. But it really does take a village. Sometimes as we discuss budgets with people and food prices go up as they have now, we make sure people know about the food bank, just in case they have a month or two that are tight. Places like the Friendship House we all know about through Westminster. They can help with so many things. And one being their clothing closet. Children often grow before paychecks grow. And the Housing Alliance keeps us informed of housing needs and the many ways that we can be involved in making a difference in our communities. So it's all part of helping people start again. You're probably aware of this. I know many of you may be more active than I am, but in case you are not aware of it, a day for housing in Dover, we can have an opportunity to be in front of our elected officials May 22nd. And there's also the 1% of the state budget for affordable housing. We are, so short of affordable housing, and people have to live somewhere. I see it every day, trying to get work and make their little checks stretch and earn a living while they maybe go to school or learn a trade. And we should help. And our local nonprofits advocate. There's many ways to get involved. So ways to be involved with Child Inc. If you want to know more, we have a wish lists for our shelter. Say that 10 times fast. For our rapid rehousing program, we have a walk against domestic violence that's scheduled for May 18th. It happens to be, of course, when we have Sunday service, so that might not be for everybody. We have the domestic violence advocacy program, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested about that or connect you to our volunteer program. And also foster parents. We're always looking for foster parents. We're always looking for landlords. We're always looking for help. So Child Inc.'s Rapid Rehousing Program, just as a point of information, was ranked #1 by the Delaware Continuum of Care, which means that, we are highly ranked for receiving more funding. Hopefully funding will continue to be available. It's based on a number of metrics, including how quickly we get individuals and families housed, but also on helping them to stay housed and the long-term success numbers. So last year, I think we housed about 120 people. I don't have the numbers handy for the year before that. But we keep busy at Child Inc. I would, I guess, want to turn it over to some questions now. I know I went through that rather quickly, but I'd be interested to hear what your questions might be. And let me see if I can close this and open up the view. Are we back on full screen again to everybody else?
I've got a blank
Or are
screen.
you still seeing my slides?
No, I've got a blank screen, Sue.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you stop the share?
Yeah, bear with me. Um,
There we go.
Is it off?
That's good.
Yeah, now we
I
can
think
see,
I found the button.
now we
Okay,
can see
thank you.
everybody.
I appreciate that.
That was wonderful, Sue. Thank you so much.
So it's a lot of information. But does anybody have any questions or comments?
So how do people get connected with Child Inc? Do they need to know that you exist? How does that contact typically get made?
Well, I'm trying to change my screen, but people contact us, in my experience, it depends on what it is you're looking for. Many people contact us because they're in need of domestic violence assistance. And they would do that through our hotline. And that is 302-762-6110. And they can also just look for our website at, childinc.com. And there's all of our services are listed there, including we have now a hotline chat if people feel more comfortable talking to us initially that way.
Do you get referred from, say, a general 911 call in any cases?
Usually it's not a general, but we have a contact that is a social worker at the Wilmington Police Department. And, we know we're on a first name basis and, she would make referrals for us if that's an appropriate one. And she would first be in touch again with the shelter. In certain instances, they may bring someone right there unless they themselves are meeting somebody at the hospital, and then link from the hospital to the shelter. So we always want to make sure that their health is taken care of first, and before bringing them to the shelter, just in case, especially if there's a head injury or anything that, bleeding has attention before we start services.
Roger?
You mentioned funding, but and I think there was a slide on where some of the funding is coming from, but what's the source of your funds? Is it several places or mainly one?
Well, mainly one, but we have a second fund. So HUD, Housing and Urban Development, federal funding, is our source that pays our checks. It pays for, us to house people. It pays for a number of services. And then we have another fund that helps us if we need, very basic, but we'll buy beds for people. But often people, they are fleeing. That's the people that they're not just experiencing domestic violence, but they're fleeing. So they don't have anything. We can pay for moving services. We can pay for a deposit on utilities. And that's for a separate, what is called Fund for Women through the Delaware Community Foundation. And I should emphasize the difference because unfortunately, abuse is because of the numbers, 1 in 3 women have experienced it in their life. When we talk about people who have been rendered homeless, many of those women have experienced domestic violence. The difference with our shelter is that people are fleeing. They are in the act of fleeing the violence at that time. It's not a past event.
If someone contacts you through the hotline or whatever and indicates that they need to get out of their situation, but they have no means of transportation, their whereabouts are being closely monitored by the abuser or whatever, do you folks go in and actually physically help to remove them, or how do you go about the removal process to transfer them to the shelter?
Well, and it's best coming from one of our service providers on the hotline, but I have been trained for that. And we wouldn't send a shelter person into a home where there's danger. There would, depending on an array of circumstances, we would work with that person to safety plan. Can they get out of the house? Is one thing to get away from the abuser. If that's not possible, the police would likely be involved. But we wouldn't send a staff into a home that is, currently there's a violent situation. It would be more of, can the person get out, or does 911 need to go in?
Mhm.
I volunteered at the Chester County Domestic Violence Center for quite some time, and at least in Chester County, we had an average of 7 times that a person would call before they actually moved out, because they would first call because they were panicked, and that would usually happen 2 or 3 times, and then they would go back, and the abuser would say that everything was going to be fine, and then they would start making plans, like collecting all the children's birth certificates, school records, and so forth. And it was on the average about 7 times before they finally moved into the shelter, and it was made semi-permanent. I think it's probably the same all over.
Well, I mean, people do go back. I don't know if it's applies to everyone.
Yeah.
And it depends on the severity of the problem, because it can escalate.
Mhm.
Start with some manipulation and some bullying, and then start to become worse, where simply the person can't stay, and that drives them out. When other cases, it starts very quickly. So, 7 may be a general rule, but I do think it does vary from person to person,
Yeah.
um, and by situation.
Yes. I agree completely.
I remember years ago, I think before Westminster even did our homeless task force, we had a Sunday morning education event where a very accomplished young woman spoke about how she became homeless. I think this was back at a point where we thought most homeless people were winos sleeping in doorways. And part of the education program was fundamentally to say this could happen to anyone. And this young woman was divorced and had a son, and she began dating a police officer. And over time, he took over the finances. They lived in her home she owned, had a mortgage, and he began isolating her from her friends. And it culminated when he hit her son and she left. But she had to go to Salisbury, Maryland, enroll her son in school under a false name, get a job herself where she was paid in cash. In the meantime, her partner stopped paying the mortgage. The house was possessed. He arranged to take all of the contents out. And so here she is, college educated woman with a full-time job and a very productive life, ending up living in terror because he told her that as a police officer, he could engage police officers wherever she went to punish her. And I just remember being so struck by, that could be me, that could be my sister, that could be my daughter. Um, and I'm sure what you see is case after case of people, sure, perhaps many more on the lower socioeconomic rungs, but that kind of behavior and that kind of result can literally happen to anybody, even though we think each of us individually would be stronger than that. As you said, hit me one time and that would be it. That it typically is not the way it works. And I think the counseling that you do must be invaluable to people, helping people get back on a path to healthy relationships and healthy lives. And so it must be so rewarding to see that you have that sort of effect on people.
Well, it takes a village. There's a lot of us, so it's great to be just a little part of that. Because it could happen to anybody. Do we work with more people that are, lower on the socioeconomic ladder? Perhaps, but not always. I think people on the higher rungs may just have more resources. So they may not come to us first, but it just depends on if they have to hide, and go to a shelter and, talk to so many people that had similar situations to what you just described, that the children couldn't go to the same school because the abuser knew where it was. They had to change jobs. Delaware, another benefit is there's an address confidentiality program where you or I can't go to the Department of not Labor, I'm sorry, the Department of Motor Vehicle and use a PO box for our address. But in this program, somebody can do this because abusers can be very savvy and find people. We counsel people all the time of, watch your kids, on social media. Don't post any pictures because they may recognize something near the home. Really going to great lengths to be careful about locations. Don't share your address with, now that you're relieved, you have a new address. You don't have to invite anybody over because friends have given it away accidentally, sharing it with so-and-so who knew, whose friend was a friend with the abuser, and they're there again. It's frightening. It's frightening, and people are truly afraid for their lives. So it's much more than we think it is when we hear about domestic violence and people putting up with things.
I have a question. If when somebody's done that to ruin your life, I guess I have to think about it, are there legal recourses? I mean, do you get many cases where people say, I'd like to, you know, file charges or sue, or it seems like their lives have been upended by this, and would there be a legal remedy?
Depends on the circumstances. A lot of people are afraid to file a protection from abuse because they think it's just going to anger that person that much more and they won't honor it. And sometimes, and this I've seen happen quite a bit, that a woman may call, or just I'm using a woman for example, may call the police because she's getting beaten and she's flailing to defend herself. And he said, look, there's a bruise on me, there's a scratch on me, and file charges against her. And now she has, a professional with a degree has a record.
Mhm.
So, did you say something?
Just absorbing. It's a lot.
So it really depends on the situation, whether, and we don't really try to influence that. There are lawyers for that, and we have classy community legal aid that will tell them the best way to go. But a protection from abuse is a good start. Whether they honor it or not, we don't know. But, it's our business to just help people start their lives again and then connect them to the resources that can give them the best advice as far as their, legally moving forward. I'm so close to this that there's a lot that, I just don't see. I don't know if I've overlooked anything obvious that needs to be explained.
I think we're all just kind of very sobered and maybe a little dumbstruck to imagine what these people go through and what a godsend your organization is in the face of that.
Well, I appreciate everyone listening, and if we all have a bit more of an understanding of what domestic violence entails, then that's something. Um, people just want to be heard. That's, what we find that, they're fighting to have a nice life for themselves and their children and an opportunity to move forward.
It would seem to me that the hardest thing, if you find yourself in a situation where you're the object of domestic violence, would be feeling like you're having to cope with this all by yourself, that you can't talk to friends, you are ashamed to talk to family, you don't want people to think that this is your situation. And so it seems to me that the biggest benefit that you offer people dealing with this is the knowledge that they're not alone, that there's somebody there to help, that hope and a fresh start are possible. How you accomplish that, all of the logistics, the funding are essential to making it happen. But it seems to me that bridge, that support to someone experiencing what they never thought they were going to have to deal with, has to be such an incredible gift.
Wow. Thank you all for listening. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because the stigma is so great that sometimes people are, many times they're so alone that they have friends and family that are frustrated with them or angry with them because they, tolerated whatever their situation involved. But, people have a lot of money in that bank, a lot of investment in that marriage. People don't understand everything that's involved and the weight of it, and cast judgment quite easily. So clients are often feeling very alone. And when we talk about goals and, what they want to do going forward, you know, it's it's as if no one's asked them that in a very long time. Um, but yeah, I feel extremely fortunate to be just a small part of what Child Inc. does.
Thank God there are such people and agencies that you represent, because I won't go into all the details, but a former school teacher of mine from the Unionville Chaddsford district where I went, told in a very lucid moment, told me a story when she was about 99 years old, that one of the things that haunts her from her teaching career was a teenage girl who told her she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And she said, this was the 60s. Where did you go? And when I offered to even take her to the school nurse, she said, you can't do that. The bottom line is my mother has nothing. This is a second marriage. My mother has nothing. They'll end up separating. Where will we end up? We have nobody. And this teacher said to me, of all the students that I dealt with in my teaching career, I often reflect and think, and this woman was a very devout Catholic woman. She said, I pray for her regularly and wonder whatever happened to her, because there were no agencies like you folks at that time.
Yeah, well, that is sobering. So yeah, I'm thankful, and I'm thankful to be a part of it, and so many other organizations that Westminster works with. Friendship House, we refer people there all the time. Those people that have to leave their house without the birth certificates and all of the paperwork you need to get anything done. Friendship House helps with those things. And for, the costs are far less, and it's a godsend to be in this community, because it does take everyone calling, is there any funding over there for something that our grants don't cover, or clothing, that we can't provide, because people, may need to flee with nothing and they're starting from scratch. So, Delaware, we have our hiccups for sure, but we also have our advocates, and they do a lot.
Well, thank you, Sue, for being here. Thank you, Sandy, for setting this up. I think we're all grateful to be here this evening. I know people who watch this video will be grateful as well. So thank you all for being here. And we will look forward to hopefully seeing you all next week, next Thursday.
Thank you. Thank you all for your
Thank
time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.